צהריים טובים. אני נשיא, הולכים לעבודה, להתנדבות ועמיתים לעתיד, חברים בוגרי עוצמה, עוד מעט. אדוני הנשיא, יש בפניך איזה 62 מתנדבים. האמת היא חושב שהמילה הנכונה יותר היא שליחים מתפוצות צפון אמריקה, ואנשים שהם בוגרים מאוניברסיטאות בכל ארצות הברית וקנדה, שנפלו על ראשם והחליטו ששנה מסוימת הם רוצים להתנדב את כמישהו שעלה ארצה לפני 20 שנה, אז יש לי איזשהו זכות להגיד. אבל הייתי אומר, אולי יותר חשוב מזה שהם נותנים שנה מחייהם. הם בעצם נותנים את כל חייהם, למה יהודי. זו שנה, ולכמה מהם אפילו לא שנה ראשונה. יש אנשים כאן שכבר עבדו בקהילות יהודיות בארצות הברית במשך מספר שנים, הרבה שנים. ולקחו שנה מסוימת להתחיל בעומק את הקשר שלהם עם החלק המרכזי של העם היהודי שחזר לארצו. אני לא רוצה להגיד, אולי אתה תשאל מה התוכניות שלהם לעתיד מבחינת עלייתם ארצה. מה שאני כן יודע שכולם עלו מדרגה במיוחד בנושא של המחויבות שלהם לעתיד העם. וזה יהיה בקשר איתנו הדוק, ואולי על ידך יושבים דוגמאות לנושא הזה של האחדות הזאת. מצד אחד, לדוגמה יושבת קרן אדלמן, שהיא יושבת ראש של תוכנית עוצמה משיקגו, ופעילה ביותר מדי ארגונים, עם כל האותיות שאתה רק רוצה, עם ה-CJF, ה-IBM וכו' וכו'. זה, מה? לא אומר לך טוב. יושב מצד השני אברהם אינפלד, גם על הארצה מזמן, שאברהם הוא היושב ראש של הפורום הישראלי, שזה אחד מהגורמים שלפחות בארץ נותן חיסוי לקבוצה הזאת ולתוכנית הזאת. אז בין קרול ובין אברהם ואנוכי, שאני יושב ראש של עוצמה כאן בארץ גם כן. אז אנחנו אומרים משהו לעם היהודי, ואני מוכרח להדגיש את זה בשבילכם שיושבים כאן. אולי. יפה, הסלתי אותם כבר. מה שאני מקווה שיכול לצאת מהחדר הזה ומהעיר הזאת ומהתוכנית הזאת, איזשהו מסר לעם שיושב גם בארצו וגם בתפוצות, מוכרחים לשמור על אחדות העם, ואני רוצה לקוות שהתוכנית הזאת היא רק אחד, הסימנים לאחדות המשמעותי היום, ולאפשרות של אחדות בעתיד, עם כל הוויכוחים, אבל בכל זאת אחדות. אז אלו הדברים שלי, אני לא צריך להסביר לך מה התוכנית עוצמה, אתה מכיר את זה, אולי קצת פחות טוב ממני, אבל גם אני חדש בתפקיד שלי, ואתה היית כאן לפני שנה, ובעזרת השם גם בשנה הבאה. מה שאני רוצה לעשות עכשיו, זה לבקש מאחד המשתתפים, להגיד כמה מילים. בבקשה איתן.
כבוד נשיא מדינה וחברים יקרים, שמי איתן שמולוביץ' ואני מייצג את הקהילה היהודית מטורונטו, קנדה. אני רוצה להזכיר את התחלת פרויקט עוצמה לפני 10 חודשים. אחרי שירדנו מהמטוס, התאחדנו עם כל הציוד שלנו. ראיתי שכמה מאיתנו ידעו איך לארוז בקלות, אחרים הביאו את כל ביתם. כמה מאיתנו הביאו 3 או 4 מזוודות קטנות, אחרים הביאו מזוודה אחת ענקית. כל אחד הביא מזוודה שונה, ואין לי ספק שמילאו אותה עם דברים לגמרי שונים. באותו אופן, כל אחד בא עם ציפיות שונות ובגלל סיבות שונות. אחדים לא היו בארץ אף פעם ורצו טעם של חיים בישראל. אחדים טיילו בארץ לא מעט פעמים ורצו לחיות פה למשך זמן יותר ארוך. כמה קיוו ללמוד יותר על היהדות שלהם ועל ההיסטוריה, הגיאוגרפיה והתרבות של ישראל. כמה רצו לשפר את העברית שלהם, וכמה רצו לתרום מעצמם ומכישרונם למדינה. אני באתי עם כל הרצונות האלו. רציתי לגדול ולהתפתח. ידעתי שאני אחזור הביתה עם רכוש חדש, חוויות מדהימות, מנהגים ישראלים וטעמים חדשים. רק לא ידעתי בדיוק איך אני אמלא את המלבדה שלי. ההזדמנות לשפר את העברית שלי באה מיד. באולפן בקיבוץ מעיין צבי, אוצר המילים שלי גדל עם מילים כמו פער ושערוריה. ובכל מקום שעבדתי וטיילתי, קלטתי מילים פחות גבוהות כמו סבבה וסתם. כמו שלמדתי עברית בתוך מסגרת פרויקט עוצמה, וגם באופן לא רשמי, למדתי על ישראל והחיים בארץ. באותו זמן שלמדנו עובדות על ההיסטוריה והתרבות, השתתפנו באירועים עכשוויים. הייתי בחיפה ביום אחרי אסון המסוקים, שבו נהרגו 73 חיילים. אני זוכר שכמעט לא היו אנשים בקניון, והאנשים שכן היו, הסתובבו כמו שהיה להם את משקל המוות בגב. כל אחד שדיברתי איתו נראה כאילו הוא ראה את עצמו באחד המסוקים. זה מה שקורה במדינה שבה כל אחד היה, יהיה או אינו חיי. בדרך אספנו קטעים כאלה שאנחנו שומרים כרכוש יקר. אבל גם נתנו קטעים מעצמנו. מה שאולי חשבנו כפחות חשוב בהתחלה, באמת היה נורא חשוב לאנשים שאיתם עבדנו. היו לי כמה שיחות פשוטות שבמקור לא ציפיתי שישפיעו על אף אחד. באילת, איפה שעבדתי במסלול העבודה הקהילתית, ילד אחד לא האמין שהיו מנהגים משותפים בין יהודים בישראל לבין יהודים בצפון אמריקה. יש לכם ליל סדר בפסח? הוא שאל. כן, אפילו יש לנו 2, עניתי. זאת הייתה הפעם הראשונה שהבנתי שנהפכתי להיות שגריר לקהילות היהודיות מחו"ל. הנה דוגמה שנייה. בבוקר שעזבתי את כפר הנוער עיינות בפברואר, ילדה אחת התקרבה אליי ואמרה תודה. למה? שאלתי לה. כי כשהיית פה, היה לי מישהו שבירך אותי כל בוקר ואיחל לי לילה טוב כל לילה. בלי לדעת, נגעתי בנפש של בן אדם. אין לי ספק שדבר דומה קרה לכל אחד פה. לכמה ילדים השארנו ביטחון עצמי יותר חזק. לכמה תלמידים השארנו הרגלי למידה יותר מקצועיים. לנשים מסכנות שסובלות מאלצהיימר השארנו חיוכים וחודשיים עם חברים. העיקר הוא שנתנו מליבנו ושיפרנו את החיים של בן אדם, אפילו לחודש, אפילו ליום. כשנתנו מעצמנו, בנינו קשרים עם ישראלים, מרקעים שונים ועם דעות שונות. מקריית שמונה עד אילת. הזיכרון של הזמן איתם הם הרכוש הכי יקר שאנחנו הולכים איתנו. נזכור את החברים שהכרנו. נזכור את המשפחות המאמצות שנתנו לנו בית חם, מחסה אפשרי ומקום לכינוס כשנחזור. ונזכור את המשפחות האמיתיות שבאנו להכיר יותר טוב. בשנה הזאת היה לי את המזל להכיר 20 קרובי משפחה שאף פעם לא ידעתי שהיו לי. עכשיו אני יודע שיש לי שורשים מפוזרים בכל אזור הארץ, והם הדברים הכי חשובים לי בישראל. אז בסוף השנה יש לנו הרבה אוצרות חדשים לשמור, שלא היו לנו בהתחלה. יש לנו הבנה חדשה על ישראל וישראלים. יש לנו קשרים וזיכרונות וביצועים ששונים מבין אדם לבין אדם, אבל שכל אחד צריך לשמור. עכשיו השאלה היא, מה לעשות עם כל הרכוש החדש? אני מאמין שהמשימה שלנו היא לא להסתפק במה שעברנו, אלא להמשיך לאסוף רכוש. מה שראינו ושמענו והרגשנו זה רק התחלה. יש כל כך הרבה תשבוכת לנתח ולאתר לפני שנבין. תמיד יהיו יותר אנשים לעזור להם ויותר קשרים לבנות. וזה לא חשוב אם אנחנו פה בישראל או בצפון אמריקה או במקום אחר, תמיד יהיה יותר לעשות. אני מקווה שפרויקט עוצמה היה רק התחלה של יחסינו עם ישראל, ואני מקווה שרכושנו יגדל עם יותר זיכרונות, יותר ידע ויותר קרובים מעם ישראל. תודה. לפני שאני יושב, אנחנו רוצים לתת לך מתנה צנועה. תודה. החולצה הרשמית של פרויקט עוצמה 11.
אני רוצה להזמין אותך. אדוני נשיא, לפני שנכנסת, אני סיפרתי לחבר'ה שלדעתי האישית, אני חושב שאתה ופריט ויצמן, היחסות של אנחנו, העם הפשוט הרחב, מתייחסים לכם כאיזשהו אבא ואמא, בהחלט חברי משפחה. זה דבר חשוב ביותר, אז אני רוצה לבקש מאבא לדבר
עכשיו אני לא מבין. עברית או אנגלית? You know, there's always a stupid joke that I like to tell on an occasion like this, that many years ago in London, when a Zionist leader came to speak in Whitechapel somewhere to a crowd of Jews, and he asked, you know that one? I said, what shall I speak? English or Yiddish? They shouted, speak English, Yiddish we all know. I think that by the expression on the faces of some of the boys and girls here, who I don't think understood everything the young man said, I think that I'll try my English. Okay? Is it better? Will you understand what I said? מה שמך? איתן, טוב. So I don't want to be too long-winded about Zionism and my opinions about certain things, what the Jews should do and how I look at Judaism and Jewry. But to tell you that we are now on the eve of the 50th anniversary of 50 years to the sovereignty of the State of Israel. Zionism did not start 100 years ago. It's the first Zionist Congress that was convened 100 years ago. Zionism, in the expression of tilling the land and building the settlement, it started about 120 years ago. In the shape of places like Petah Tikva, Rishon LeZion, Gedera, Nesiona, places like this. I don't know whether you know them or not. My late old lady, my late mother, would have been 102 now, and she was born in Rishon LeZion. The first Zionist Congress was convened 100 years ago. But that's technicality. Everybody says 100 years to Zionism. Another thing is, to be really correct, Zionism has existed since we went to exile 2000 years ago. The Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, and the wish expressed by many Jews to come back to Eretz Israel. Some did do it, some only prayed. There's still a lot who just pray. And in the 50 years of sovereignty, And the years prior to that, let's take Balfour Declaration as a milestone, 1917 to 1947, with the Declaration of the United Nations about the creation of a Jewish state. 30 years and 50 years since then, about 80, 90, 100 years. We are now the second largest community, Jewish community in the world. We're 4.7 million Jews in Israel. I wish we were like that in 1948. Probably the war of 1948, which was the toughest one we had, would have fared differently to what were the results of. We lost 1% of the population in the war of 1948. The population of Israel today is 4.7. That's as if, God forbid, in 18 months we would have lost 47,000 casualties dead in Israel, or 2.5 million in the United States of America, which she didn't suffer, and she didn't lose that in 2 world wars. And the idea of coming back to Eretz Israel, it's called Palestine then, was to try and create a Jewish state, but not only for the physical creation of the state, but try and create a new nationhood here, which will be different. A nation that will have its own parliament, its own government, bad or good, irrelevant. You're seeing now a crisis going through the government. Don't flip, don't panic. We shall get over it. We should have a new minister of finance, we should have a new minister of this, a new minister of that. Usually it's very difficult to get rid of ministers. This time he resigns, so it makes life easier. He's a nice boy, I like him very much, he's a very good friend. And I'm sorry that he came to a conclusion he had to do that. But the idea was to create a different character. Like you have a Jewish character who was born in Poland, a Jewish character who was born in Yemen or Morocco and Iraq, or even, I think even Canada and the United States are different. Am I right? Mm-hmm. They are as close as possible, but they're still a difference. To create something that is Israeli, that is Jewish, that is now commonly known as the Sabra. And I think that we succeeded partially. It's not a full success. But as soon as we came and our forefathers decided to settle down here, and most of them settled on the land. My old man, for instance, was born in Pinsk in Belarus, in Russia. At the age of 18, after graduating school in the Russian language and not knowing any other language, picked up German and went to Berlin University to study agronomy for the sole purpose of coming to Israel to help in agriculture. He ended his life as a businessman, but he's a good man anyhow. May his soul rest in peace. And many like him. No sooner did we settle in Rishon, Petah Tikva, Gedera, Ness Tziyona, Bat Shlomo, Rosh Pina, Metula, the Arabs didn't like it. And to be objective, I can understand it. They suddenly felt that something big is going to happen here. Something very big is going to happen. Them Jews are arriving here. What's going to happen to us? And instead of settling down and talking to us, friendship and common life, troubles erupted way back in the 20s. I'm 73. I can vaguely remember when at the age of 5, 1929, when there were bad riots in Israel. And just to give you an example how difficult Zionism was, I got a letter 2 years ago from an Israeli, who must be an old man, from a place called Zichron Yaakov, telling me that when he was a young man in Salzburg in Austria, my late uncle, who was the first president of this little state, was a guest at a home in Salzburg. And the news came of the severe riots in Hebron and Tzfat, where a lot of Jews were killed brutally, especially in Hebron. And he said, I as a child asked him, why do the British behave the way they do, meaning not defending, and as a result of this and that happened. And he said, your uncle answered me and said that if between 1919 to 1929, 1 million Jews would have arrived in Israel, he wouldn't have asked me this question. one of the basic problems in Israel today, there are many problems, is how many Jews are going to be here in the 21st century. And I hope that it will be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Not that always numbers count, but still in these small numbers, between 4.7 to 7, there's a great difference. Like between 600,000 that we were in 1948 to 4.7 that we are now, there's a mighty difference. In the years, we've managed to create here an industry that is not a bad example to certain parts of the world. Our income per capita is $17,000. You probably thought that this country is sand dunes and desert and rocks and God knows what. And you see that there are nice little houses, a lot of greenery, and a lot of industry. I'll come to the bad things, don't worry. People come from all over the world. One of the amazing things, the Chinese come. I have at least once a month or twice a month guests from China who want to come and see and learn what we do here. I had here one of the Chinese leaders from the Chinese parliament, and he said, we would like to learn a lot of what you do in agriculture. I said, well, I suppose we have a lot of people who would let me do that. He said, you know, we have 800 million farmers. I said, no, now I know, but 800 million farmers, and they come here, with the Arab population, by the way, we're 5.7, they come here to find and look for knowledge of how to get better crop than what they get today. Because they probably have an agriculture of hundreds and thousands of years old. For instance, there's a big air show going on in Paris now, which is every 2 years. And the Israel aircraft industry, and Israel industry is represented there. And we got a prize for air-to-air missile that we invented. Now, we have other things, not only in the shooting game to show, but to go to Paris in an air show and get the prize for one of the top air-to-air missiles when competing Russia and America and Sweden, England, France, Germany, is not a bad pat on the shoulder for a country that needed every rifle, every pistol, every piece of an aeroplane 40, 50, and even 30 years ago. I can go on like this. The basic problem now is how to come to an understanding with the Palestinians. Because whether you like it or not, whether we like it or not, we live in an area that we chose to live here, and we live in a place that we decided to rebuild the land of our ancestors. In biblical Israel, where there are a few Arabs knocking around. 1 million in Israel, 2.5 million Palestinians in Gaza and Western Bank, 62 million Egyptians, 30 million Syrians, etc. You can fight most of them most of the time. It's very difficult to fight with all of them all the time. We can do that. But this is not the aim in life. The aim in life is to create a society with a younger generation that will have a better life, which will be able to create a home, which will be able to get education, which will have a standard of living which is appropriate, and not take the little rifle and go to battle every few years. Usually, sometimes I meet a friend of mine and says, I remember you from the war. And I have to ask him which one. And I think that now we're in a period where we're approaching days of truth. How to conclude this? Very difficult problem, because we're at peace with Egypt now for 18 years, with Jordan for 3 years, with the Palestinians we have an understanding, which is very difficult for 2 years, 2.5 years, Syria not, Lebanon will have trouble. So the main task for a country that wants to build itself and wants to see immigration coming here. Because, as the first speaker said, I can easily ask you, who thinks to come here? Who intends to come and live here? Don't answer me. Don't answer me. I have my doubts. I'll be very glad to see 10 hands if I can say, I do. But let's leave it. And to have immigration coming, especially from societies like the United States and Canada and Europe, we have to have a much better Israel than what we have today, with all the good that we have. We have religious problems. We have differences of opinion of what is practiced in Judaism. We're in the midst of it, of reforms and conservative. We'll find a solution, because the last thing we need is to split the Jewish world because of laws passed by our own Knesset. And you're now in the midst of discussions to find a solution how to do that. And since we've lasted for over 2,000 years, I think we'll overcome this one too. I can go until the early hours of the morning, but I think that you probably know some of the things I want to tell you. One of them is that I'd like to see all of you live in it. It's not a coincidence I would like to. I think this is the right thing for a Jew to do. You might argue the point with me, but knowing the situation of the Jews in America, I think they know. What is the intermarriage percentage now? How much? 50%? What? 48, okay. What's going to happen in 50 years' time? What's going to happen in 30 years' time? What's going to happen? And in France it's worse. And I think that the only solution, if you want to see a Jewish nation existing, is Israel. But that's a discussion with you and me in a few minutes. We had a great Russian immigration the last 10 years. About 750,000. And I must put a good word in, because everybody thinks that all the Russians are prostitutes and all the Russians are mafiosos, which is a terrible, terrible thing to say. Because if you go to industry today, you find 15% Russians in the industry, from the top, middle, and bottom. And the injection into society, to culture, to action by the Russian immigration is terrific. And I hope more will come. About 30 to 40,000 still come, mostly now from Eastern former Soviet Union, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and all these stands. Some of them are Muslim countries. Now, I'm glad that you did find, like you expressed it, time to come and see and help and say shalom every morning to a nice little girl. And I hope that the year here gives you and gave you what is necessary to keep in touch with Israel, and if possible, to find a way to come. Question. I thought that you would be the first one. Don't ask me how, but I thought him. Tell me your name, tell me where you come from. What? Yes, I think I heard the click. Blow into it again.
Hello. Okay, now it's on. My name is Darren Spillman. I'm from Michigan. I graduated the University of Michigan with a degree in international relations.
What is international relations? I've all my life had relations with international people, and I never studied anything in that respect. Shoot.
That is a good question. If you were a recruiter, I probably wouldn't get the job. It's a combination of economics and politics.
Okay, don't take me seriously.
Okay. Basically, my question is, in what seems to be an impasse in the peace process negotiations with the Netanyahu government and the Palestinians, what do you see that needs to be done now to continue that process, and how can it be done? And it seems that terrorist attacks are carried out whether the process is going full throttle or whether it's at an impasse.
Okay. Now, first of all, terrorist activities are much less than what they were. Number one, peace brought quiet on the Egyptian border. We used to keep in the Sinai 2 divisions, mostly armor, and at least one squadron, one fighter squadron, and a lot of weaponry and a lot of army in the Sinai. Now the Sinai is back to Egypt, and on the border, I wouldn't like to guess how much we have, but we don't have far from a division. If it's a battalion, I think I'm exaggerating, because there's a demilitarization, and there's a certain situation between us and Egypt, with the Sinai in the middle, which makes the situation less volatile. Same thing about Jordan. Lebanon, I'm starting with not with local internal terrorists, but borders. Lebanon is dependent on our relationship with Syria. I don't believe that we can subdue the problems in Lebanon. We can take 1,000 tanks and walk into Lebanon again. Whew, the world will go upside down. And we can do it. We've done it before. I, as defense minister, is responsible for one campaign called the Litani Operation, which we moved up to a river called the Litani River. We're still shooting. Unless we sit down and talk to the Syrians and come to an understanding with them, Lebanon will be up in arms all the time. Because they use that to needle us all the time. Now, what is necessary is for both parties to understand that we've reached the end of the road after many years, and we have to sit down and come to a conclusion of how we partition what is left of Palestine between them and us. We now, I don't know whether we pay, but we confront the situation as a result of not taking the whole of Eretz Israel in 1948. We should have reached the Jordan then. The whole story would have been different. We didn't have enough strength. Because we were in the city of Jenin, we were in Latrun, we were in the old city, we were in Gush Etzion, and we were smartly kicked out there by the Jordanian army, which was the toughest army in 48. Take it lovingly. I think that the world Jewry didn't take seriously the creation of a Jewish state in 1948, 3 years after the end of the Holocaust and the end of Second World War, and everybody came from the war, licking his wounds probably, and looking up his little house in Michigan or in San Diego or Los Angeles or wherever it is, and very, very, very few came here to fight. If we had 5,000, 10,000 Americans who had fought in the U.S. Defense Forces in the Second World War, I think things would have been different. We had a few pilots, very good ones. Some of them are still good friends of mine. The only difference, they're 50 years older, so am I. But they came. A few were killed. The Arabs are paying now for not accepting the partition plan that the UN offered. Because the UN decision in 1947, to partition Palestine and create a Jewish state and an Arab state was accepted by us. I celebrated the early hours of the morning on the 29th of November when the decision was voted positive in the United Nations, because there was a decision to create a Jewish state. The following morning, the front started. And 5 Jews were killed here, and the balloon went up there, and the War of Independence started, where on the 15th of May, Egyptian armies, Iraqi armies, Jordanians, Lebanese, Syrians, the whole caboodle tried to destroy us, tried to finish us off, and failed. But in the years between 48 and 77, which is the year that Sadat came here, which is the beginning of the thawing of the situation, there were wars. We had the 56 campaign, the 67 campaign, the in-between troubles, the 73 campaign, and the war in Lebanon. Some of our boys are going here with ribbons. Most of them are not for doing something gallant, some are only taking part in a campaign. And now we have to realize that we cannot have the whole of the Western Bank. Some people perhaps think they can, but I, in my position, make here a statement. I don't think we will be able to keep the whole Western Bank. And they should know that they will not be able to keep the whole Western Bank. They have Gaza, they have 7 more big cities, important cities like Jenin, Tulkarem, Kalkilia, Nablus, Ramallah, Beit Lehem, Jericho, and part of Hebron. And according to the agreement, call it the Oslo Agreement, but it's actually the agreement of Camp David. Because if you read Camp David and you read Oslo, it's almost identical. And I'm glad that I took part in Camp David. I'm glad I took part in all the wars of Israel except the Lebanese one. And I'm glad I didn't take part in the Lebanese one. Reasons, chapter 2. But I'm very glad that I took part making peace with Egypt. So now both sides have to come to a conclusion. I shall not have everything and you shall not have everything. Once you come to realize that, there's a basis to talk. And to come to an agreement with the Palestinians is more difficult than to come with the Egyptians. Of course, with the Egyptians, here is a border, we agreed to go back, here is Egypt, Sinai, here is we, demilitarized, armies not, armies yes missiles, no missiles, yes cannons, not cannons. International relations, read the peace treaty. 2 canoes, 4 aeroplanes, etc. With the Jordanians, here is the Jordan, here you, here we are. The Palestinians, it's intricate. We are all intermingled with each other. And to find a solution that is viable and a solution that will hold. So you want to find yourself that you have a Palestinian in a house and an Israeli in the garden, or vice versa. You have to be very clever, very courageous on both sides, and realize at the beginning that you're walking into a situation that you want to have everything you want. I don't think that both sides realize it yet. I'm saying it because I know both sides. And I saw Arafat 6 weeks ago. And I told him, why didn't you come to Camp David? Sadat was doing the work for you. And Sadat signed a peace treaty with us conditional to solving the Palestinian problem. Where were you? I was not yet prepared. Good luck to you. You weren't prepared, so now it's not late. But you pay for time lost. Same with us. But I think, with all parties concerned, we, Egypt, Jordan, Palestinians, inwardly we all know that if anything blows up, and if the balloon really goes up, not a terrorist action here, terrorist action there are tanks and aeroplanes, hundreds on both sides. The Syrian army is a big army and Navy Air Force, so are the Egyptians, so are we. And if we come and find ourselves at loggerheads again, it's going to be probably one of the severest battles since 48 and 73, which was the second difficult one. And everybody knows that we can only lose, especially the Palestinians. So everybody is maneuvering and trying to get out of it and find a solution. Egypt is doing its best now. You can say that Egypt is not objective, but Egypt was the first one to sign a peace treaty with us. If she does not succeed, which it's a 50-50 chance, then I think the United States will step in again and do its best. We'll see the Dennis Rosses coming here. We'll see perhaps the lady coming here, which she right now is not in a hurry to come because she knows the situation perhaps is not well prepared. And in international relations, you probably learned that politicians don't like to lose. That's one of the first things to study. They want to succeed. And if she comes here, she wants to be successful. I'm quite right. That's as much as I can tell you. Rega, let me run the business. Yes, my dear.
My name is Sarah Pepper. I'm from New Jersey. And my question was, I'm a child of intermarriage. So according to Halakha, I'm not a Jew. My mother's not a Jew.
Your mother is what?
Is not a Jew.
Uh-huh.
Therefore, I'm not a Jew. But I'm somebody who's been, according to Halakha, but I'm someone who's been active all of my life in the Jewish community, grown up all along.
I have a sister who married a goy, but she's Jewish. Yeah.
But how can you ask someone like me to come here when I can't be married here? When my children couldn't be married here? When the same problems would just happen again and again?
I was asking myself, when is this question going to pop up? And I think that I told it, that we're looking for compromises, we're looking for solutions. And another thing I'll tell you, I think that if more Americans came with the ideas and the problems that you have to live here, I think a solution would have been forced even stronger. I know perhaps it's easy for me to say, but yesterday and this afternoon, representative conservatives and the other groups, where Israel is also represented. We have problems in Israel too. We have some groups in Israel who also don't like the rabbinical clutch that we live under now. Look, we have lived for 50 years without solutions, with a status quo. I was bar mitzvahed, I was married with a rabbi. Some Israelis who even have a Jewish mother don't like it. You can't have a non-kosher meal in a hotel in Israel. There's one in Jerusalem, the old city, that is not Jewish. You can go there and have some eggs and bacon. Here you can't. So there is a problem. I don't whitewash it, but I think we'll solve it. I would like to see you come here before we solve the problem, because the more we have people like you, the stronger will be the path for a solution. Right? Yes? Yeah, I'll talk to the trumpet here.
I'm sorry. Do you believe that solution will be through a separation of church and state, of religion and state, or do you believe that'll just...
No, I'm not sure that will be the solution. No. No, the solution will be, I think, in a different way. You see, we have a problem, nothing to do with an intermarriage problem. The Judaism, nationhood and religion have gone together all our lives. And that's a fact. And to part ways is difficult. And we in Israel, born here, did not feel anything funny about it. Although I was not, I was bar mitzvah. I never laid tefillin. I'm not very proud of it, but I'm not. It doesn't hurt me. But I did go through the drill like all my generation did. One thing is very important. When I joined the Royal Air Force in 1942, at the age of 18, to the horror of my mother, because the Germans were about 16 kilometers from Alexandria, and I was all eager to go. I thought I was going to win the war on my own. She gave me a little Bible, which went with me all through the war, 4 years, and I keep it till now. Now, you can also discuss what is tradition and what is Judaism. There are certain things here that the ultra-Orthodox Jews adhere to that makes us have goose pimples. Come and live here. When the day for marriage comes, come to me. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Dan Silverman from the great state of New York.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering what your personal opinion is on the American government thinking of moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and do you think that the Israeli government should...
What do you expect me to say?
Well, I'm on pins and needles waiting.
No. Look, for us, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. By the way, Israel was never a capital of any other country. Jordan was kept Jerusalem for 19 years, never made it a capital of the Jordanian-Palestinian entity. Amman is the capital. In the Turkish days, Jerusalem was a city with its holiness, with its peculiarities, with its specialities. The only time in history that Jerusalem was the capital of the state was the Jewish state. And I think that the decision by Congress is a good decision. It might cause a little bit of turmoil, but we'll have to solve the problem how the Palestinians solve their own capital, which are also ways. Where there's a will, there's a way. They will not certainly have a Knesset next to our Knesset. That's not. So I think it's a good decision. It made the Arabs angry, but I can't help it. What is my opinion? Right decision. Yes.
Mr. President, you've done so much for the state of Israel in your life, and I was just curious, what do you consider your most significant contribution to the state?
My contribution?
Yeah, your most significant.
Some people think that the greatest contribution is when I leave my job. Look, it's a very difficult question, because we were brought up, at least my generation, that our duty is to serve our country without all the pompness and bullshit and all this. This was it. We were brought up at school. We are Zionists who live here. Our forefathers came from Pinsk, from Minsk, from Schminsk, from places like this. You were born here. You speak Hebrew. By the way, the greatest thing that has happened to Jewry and to Zionism is the Hebrew language. The Hebrew language and the Israeli army are the two greatest uniting forces of Jews who are coming here. You should see the Russians, how they picked up Hebrew like that. Americans have difficulties in Hebrew, I don't know why, but They probably still use the Cherokee or something like this. So I decided at the age of 18 I'm joining Royal Air Force. A, I wanted to fight the Germans. B, I wanted to do something good for my country. C, I wanted to fly. Could be that. I was a native of Palestine. The passports we had were not blue passports like British citizens have. Anyone from Britain here? Yes? Do you have a blue passport? Or you had a blue passport? It says Great Britain, whatever it says. I had a brown passport which says British but Palestine. And I had to wait a year before I was decontaminated as a native and allowed to go to flying school. And only 20 of us who had the great honor of graduating flying schools in the British Air Force. So I think that my personal contribution was by sticking to my aim and become a pilot. Because eventually it contributed a lot for the foundation of the Israeli Air Force. I was not the only one. Fighter pilots, there were 7 of us. 3 were killed and 3 didn't come back to Israel. We always had Yodim. SOBs we had in the past too. And 3 hot fighter pilots disappeared. I don't know where they are. If I ever see them, I'll tell you what, but they're probably 75 years old and I don't know whether they're still alive or not. My other contribution is not alone, of trying to build the Israeli Air Force, which today is, I think, considered to be one of the best, not in quantity but in quality, and it is. Yesterday I hosted a young fighter pilot who at the age of 59 was ordered to stop flying F-16. He shot down 17 jets, enemy jets. I don't know whether there's anyone in the world who shot down that many in Vietnam or in Korea. And flies as a captain in El Al now. Look for him, kind of little fellow. And we have a fine force. Could be that the main contribution I consider is planning the Six-Day War, executing the Six-Day War, where the key was the destruction of the Egyptian Air Force in ours. The Air Force outdid me. I thought we'll do it in 6, 7, 8 hours. They did it in 3. And this was a major victory which will never happen again. And by the way, there's a great danger in victories. The generals become swarm-headed, patting on their bellies, but wars never repeat themselves. There's a certain separate situation that we had in 67 which will not repeat itself, did not repeat itself in the October War. I think that the other thing that I took part in was the negotiations with the Egyptians. And 20 years ago, in November, come November will be 20 years since Sadat came here, and to create relationship with the Egyptians, with the top hierarchy of Egypt, and eventually to come to signing a peace treaty with them. Hot, cold, lukewarm, green, yellow, blue, but it's better than what it was. And again, I didn't do it on my own. I was with Moshe Dayan, with Menachem Begin, and a few others. To achieve this, in 1978-79, final peace treaty was signed in 79, to me was a great fulfillment after having taken part in most of the wars. I wrote 2 books, that's not a great achievement. Yes.
Hi. My name is David Panush. I'm from New Jersey. I was in Jordan a few days ago, and I came back from the Allenby Bridge. From the Allenby Bridge,
Yeah.
with a taxi driver who was an Israeli Arab, and I asked him what he thinks of the Palestinian state. He told me that if there was a Palestinian state, he would still be an Israeli. So I'm curious, if there is a Palestinian state, what is your view on Israeli Arabs who would like to stay Israeli and not go to the Palestinian state, and in terms of their full equality and integration into Israeli society, which I think that most of us would agree they don't exactly have right now?
First of all, any Arabs who want to stay here is welcome. And I don't think there will be any plan of asking them to leave or encouraging them to leave. That they live here with a different culture, different language, different religion, is a fact that cannot change. Like it's very difficult for me to change, where's the young lady from Canada? Change your mother. It's a fact. And again, if I quote my late uncle, he said that Israel will be judged amongst other things with treatment of the Arab population here. And I think that the Arabs of Israel live a better life than many other Arabs in this area. But we have to remember that they have a link to the Palestinians. Most of them have families across the Green Line or into Jordan, Bedouins especially. So I don't think there'll be a problem to decide that an Israeli Arab, if there is a Palestinian, or whatever it is, a Palestinian entity who wants to stay and live here, he'll stay here. And like we expect the Israelis to behave themselves, we expect the Arabs to behave themselves. I don't think there'll be anything. But this is a typical answer of Israeli Arabs who know that they have the bread butter better here than anywhere else. Yes.
I'm Josh Sussman, and I'm actually from Otzma 8. I'm just tagging along for the day. I'm from this program 3 years ago, and I'm originally from South Carolina. My question relates
Sounds like it.
more to Israeli diaspora relations and how you see Israel's role for the diaspora, and how you see the diaspora's role in Israel.
Okay. What? No. I've decided to be nice and kind. Especially after a speech like he gave. So, the big question is, if you want to put it in a crude way, who needs more, Israel, the diaspora, Israel? And which I usually tease AIPAC man and say, who needs more, AIPAC, Israel, AIPAC? And we're big boys now. We have our own government, good or bad. We have our own defense forces, which is very well tied with the Americans. Very well tied with the Americans. I don't know if any of our generals will be found that he stepped a bit into adultery, whether he will lose his job. But vive America. And I think that there must be a link between the two communities. But the question will be how wide the gap is and how wide the gap will stay and whether it will not widen. When we become a state of 6 million, when I hope it will become the largest community in the world, I hope so. Not just for the competition's sake, because we need it. And that I think, as I said before, that the future of Judaism, because of not to have problems like this young lady has, and she'll have to come to me to help her, and I'll do it with pleasure, is that the future of Judaism, in whatever form, not in an Orthodox form, in a form that I like to think that my generation represents. The only place is Israel. And you have to ask yourself, what is the future of Jewry in the diaspora? And I said before, France is something like 17% internet, because the way of life there is much easier to do that. And if anyone wants to stay a Jew in this or that form, I think this is the place to do it. And you can argue with me. I know that some people say, but you don't go to synagogue, which is true. But see, the great difference is when I decide to go, I go lehitpalel bevet hakneset. You go davening in shul. It's a great difference. Where the hell did you pick up this davening in shul? Tell me. Germany. Yeah, Europe, but it's not Hebrew, it's not... I don't know where it comes from. Where is davening? I don't know. I say lehitpalel. And I say bet hakneset. How much will this gap widen? Since I've been in my job here, which I enjoy thoroughly, I've completed 4 years, another year and another 11 months I complete 5 years, and I can go for 5 years if I want to. If I'm voted for by the Knesset, I think I will do it. Could be that in the next 6 years you will come to me. anything in line? Yes? Okay. Good luck then. I think we have to keep in touch. But eventually your life in the States and our life here are so different. Although people think that Tel Aviv is Little America. And in some respects I don't like it. We are now McDonald's and etc. Like all the world. You go to Moscow, you see McDonald's. You go everywhere. That's the modern economic imperialism, right? Of trying to get in, and the United States is in the big way. There's a competition with Burger King, McDonald's, and what's the third one? I don't know what it is. And I think we have to keep in touch. Hebrew, again, everybody says, send teachers to teach us Hebrew. Okay, so you learn Hebrew, so what next? Will you teach your children Hebrew? Will you talk Hebrew to your children? You won't. Because you'll be living in a community that everybody speaks English, and you'll be sending your kids to school. And the gap, I think, will widen and widen. I only hope that more and more American and Canadian Jews will be here. That will be eventually 6 or 7 million Jews here, and 7 million Jews abroad, because we're now 12, 13, 14. We're not growing. We're not growing. Yes.
Hi, my name's Amy Pearl and I'm from New Jersey.
You're the fourth one from New Jersey. What's happening here? Yes?
The water. A lot of us spend time in youth villages and absorption centers and working with immigrant populations. And I think one of the largest problems and the most upsetting problems that a lot of us found in Israel was the animosity between different groups and against immigrants. For example, I had a boy in youth village who told me in Russia there was only a few times in his life that someone said, Jew, go to Israel. But here there have been countless times that people said, you're Russian, go back to the former Soviet Union. And so...
No, I didn't get you. You're in New Jersey, I didn't get you. Tell me, what's the problem? What ails you? Or what ails you? What? I don't know.
It's the animosity between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim and the Ethiopians and the Russians and...
My dear girl, okay, look, my dear girl, it's nothing compared to what it used to be. Sit down. And I'll give you an example. Usually Sephardim and Ashkenazim. We have now in the government a defense minister who is Iraqi of Kurdish origin, a foreign minister who is a Moroccan, the internal minister, the home minister is a Moroccan, the minister of welfare is a Moroccan, the Minister of Police is a Yemenite. The Minister of Justice is mother Yemenite and father Yeke, but he's still a Jew and a Yemenite. And we have the Minister of Transportation is a Moroccan. But half the government are Sephardic Jews. We never had anything like this. In the army, we had one chief of staff. Now we have the chief of the Air Force is an Iranian Jew. The head of planning is an Iranian boy, born here, but Iranian, all speaking Iranian. So it's a highly exaggerated thing. There's a lot of, if we can call it, intermarriage. And there's no, I don't think there's any more the prominence that we had 30, 40 years ago. When a boy would come and say, I want to marry this girl and she's from Morocco, and a Polish father will sort of turn his nose like this. I had a son who was killed. He was married to a girl whose mother was from Libya and father from Morocco. He used to tease me that he can get better food than I can get from his dear mother, because he can have either Libyan food or Moroccan food. And I'm not simplifying. Things have changed tremendously. In the army, in life in general, where some of the leading bankers are Iraqi Jews, and I don't think that the battle between Sephardic and Ashkenazi as it was. From time to time you have a certain character here and there, without naming names, who for purposes known to him pops up with this idea. But I think it's nothing compared to what it was 25, 30, 40 years ago. All right? And Russians, new immigrants always have a tough problem of integrating. But I think that I told you what I think of the Russian immigration. And in general, human beings are not lovable characters. Although Rabbi Akiva said, how do you translate to English? Love thy neighbor as thyself. And sometimes we lack that. But in a big way, it's a hell of a lot better than what it used to be at the beginning of the story. I have a story in my family, and I'll conclude, I think I'll conclude with Tzaddik and Jews with you. My late mother, as I said, was born here. And my grandfather, whom I didn't know, came from Ukraine with 3 or 4 sisters. One of his sisters, an aunt of my mother, whom I knew, she was a Ashkenazi, she used to speak Russian to my mother. Married a Moroccan Jew 90 years ago in Jerusalem. The Moroccan community was angry at him for taking an Ashkenazi woman. And he was practically ostracized by them for taking an Ashkenazi woman, who was a very nice lady. So things changed. And the Galuyot were all together, the Polish Galut, the Hungarian Galut, the Romanian Galut, the New York and Los Angeles and Toronto and San Diego. And Israel can mold it together. You come to the army, you won't find a difference. You see Russian officers, you see Ethiopian officers. I met the other day the Ethiopian in one of our crack parachute battalions, battalion number 890. A lieutenant, tough little Ethiopian, not exactly looking like a Norwegian, serves in the army. Thank you. See you in Israel.
Mr. President, thank you very much for hosting us. Thank you.